Let's begin. Welcome to the Innovative University's Global Webinar Series, where guests at the helm of institutions that may change how we will understand and practice higher education in the future answer questions from us and from you. Our hour-long webinar will begin with a short introduction about today's case, Babson College, and continue with a hands-on discussion about how it operates and how you may implement perhaps some of the approaches it has adopted. If you have a question, please share it in the Q&A section of Zoom. Now, behind the mic, we have Isak and I co-hosting the steering committee, helping us select the cases, and our management team led by Alexander Martinchuk making the show happen. Now, all webinar recordings will be available on YouTube, and they're also shared on LinkedIn through our group, as well as by Isak and myself. I will now pass the mic to Isak, who will tell you a little about our today's guest.
Dear colleagues, it's my pleasure to be with you again. We continue our travel around the globe to explore innovations in higher education. Unfortunately, not very often you can see innovative universities. The system is quite rigid and standard, and especially it's difficult to see innovative university which is a century old. And but today we have such a case, and it's interesting that the idea to invite our today's guest came from our conversation with Professor Rick Miller, the founding president of very young university, Wellesley College of Engineering. And he told us about great communication with and cooperation with Babson College, which is not far from Wellesley College. And I do remember I asked Rick, how you are so innovative and how can you cooperate with such, forgive me, Steve, traditional institutions like Wellesley and Babson? And Rick said, no, you have to talk to President Spinelli. And so it's my great pleasure to introduce our guest today, the president of Babson College in Massachusetts. And since 2019, Dr. Spinelli is a well-known entrepreneur. In fact, he is a rare case when we have a president of the private university, which at the same time had a very successful business career as an executive and chairman of board of different companies, including automotive sector. And he also has very interesting experience of leading another big university, but not as famous, kind of more comprehensive university, Philadelphia University, which he merged with Jefferson University. And what's interesting, I think that when I looked at the first time at the website of Babson, I've seen two important slogans that probably belong to our guest today. First, Babson is different, and the second, the courage to be bold. So we are going to listen about implementation of these very big slogans in reality of this university. President Spinelli, the floor is yours. We start with your presentation, and then Dara and I'm sure our audience will have questions.
I am thrilled to be part of you. That was a lovely and gracious introduction. I'm humbled to be a part of your network and your history and your wisdom. You have a Isaac, you have a big reputation across the globe, so it's a little bit intimidating presenting in front of you. But I also know that you have a reputation of being kind, so I'm feeling a little less anxious because of that. Babson is a it is a unique place. I describe Babson as the business equivalent of a music conservatory. So the numbers I present and the perspectives are in the context of an institution that teaches about business. All of our graduates, all of our alumni have a business perspective and are going out and doing things in the business world. That gives us a competitive advantage because there's a like-mindedness amongst them, and we can get wisdom across here, the wisdom thing again, Isaac, but you get wisdom across generations, and it flows both ways, from the younger generation to the older, from the older to the younger, and a mix of all of those. And it is that sort of dynamic ecosystem of interest and like-mindedness that really challenges a current environment. So we have the unique position of an alumni support that is seeking to do something a little bit different. And that becomes part of the ethos in the institution. We were founded by an entrepreneur. Roger Babson is a very unique guy. He made his money doing investment advising and was one of the first people to predict. He was very quantitative in nature, and it's still sort of the underpinning of our education here. And he was one of the first people to predict a stock market crash of 1929. And he took all his money out of the market, all his clients' money out of the market before the crash, and hence and then bought back at 10 cents on the dollar. So did incredibly well. We have 330 acres in Wellesley, Massachusetts, which is just outside of Boston. We have the advantage of being close to an urban center and out in a bucolic kind of area that is a beautiful campus. We're a relatively small college with about 4,000 credentialed students. We will introduce our first doctoral program next year. And we have what loosely is called executive education, but is dramatically evolving as part of our plan. I'll talk about that a little bit as we go through the presentation. We have a very clear mission, and I think that's part of what makes us unique. It is about empowering entrepreneurial leaders, and it is about growing and stewarding sustainable businesses. We believe that if you don't have a margin, you can't have a mission. If you don't have a mission, there's no way to obtain a margin. So the social and economic integration becomes an intimate part of what the end game is. We are looking for metrics that are both economically sound and durable within a society that solves problems. When we talk about a global reach, it really comes from our alums. We have been very intent about recruiting very diverse perspectives. And when we talk about that, we really do mean a global perspective. We have 125 countries represented in our 46,460 alums. And again, all of them are in business. So it becomes a very powerful network of support and understanding and information and knowledge. I can't tell you what a competitive advantage is for a small college to have a broadly based alumni community who are intently interested and aspirational about excellence and about doing something important in the future, not only what they did in the past. We built sort of a pyramid that we talk about oftentimes here, and part of the lesson about Babson is that we teach business and we practice business. You're exactly right. I was actually a Babson MBA. I started a business before I got my MBA at Babson. I got my MBA at night because I didn't think I had enough knowledge to be successful in the startup business that we had. And I would go to Babson at night, take a course that was relevant to the problems I was having in business. And I had this synthetic integration of deep thought and the next day having to put it into action. And it is that thought and action paradigm that really drove me to believe in entrepreneurship and the power of education to motivate the advance of society. So our strategy is entrepreneurial leaders impacting communities everywhere. Interestingly, and I think importantly, when we went through the whole COVID experience, we did it with a planfulness. We didn't know what the future was going to look like. So we said the first thing we have to do is survive. And if we survive, there will be lessons learned. So in that survival period, we were very, very detailed about what lessons we were learning as a part of the experience. As we saw us emerge, as we saw the institution and frankly society emerging from the pandemic, we said, how do we use those lessons to create new outcomes and new trajectories? So it isn't just in the positive parts that you learn, it's in the complete nature of your engagement in society that you gain knowledge that you can leverage into a better business model, a better organization, a better college. And we then said, given that who we are, the strategy we have, and the new lessons, how do we thrive in that? Super interesting for me, and I would ask every organization to go through this exercise. After doing it at Babson, I did it in the other companies I'm a part of, is to ask key stakeholders how to define greatness. Fascinating discussion. You would think that there would be almost a social commonality in that definition. We found great organizational discussion about, for Babson at this time, given our strategy and our mission, what is greatness? It does create a sort of North Star for an organization, and it brings people together. It gives them voice and brings them together and keeps you on a positive, I think, a positive trajectory. The result of that has been market recognition. In your video you played, it was interesting. If you can't measure it, then you're going to lose track of it, or it's not going to be important, or it must not be important to you. So we said, listen, what are the key metrics around a college that will be testimony to whether we're being successful or not? Applications are important. And we had record applications for the last 3 or 4 years in a row, to the point where we're at almost 11,000 applications for 620 undergraduate spots. That is a big pool of market demand. Our global community, and we can talk about that in the questions period, how to connect a global community. I showed you that, I'll show you a slide that talks about that global community. And record student outcomes and ROI. Is there a value proposition that is crisp and definable for your customer, for the student? And we made that a clear objective. And by accomplishing that, that creates a flywheel of success. And especially in the US, the business model, the capital required for growth and really for sustaining comes from fundraising. And we have very clear fundraising targets, and we had historic records in fundraising coming out of the pandemic. We also invested very heavily in the core business model, the strength of the faculty in both teaching and thought leadership. Much of our research, it's a complete array of research. Much of it is applied research and can be directly used by our students. And we do believe that, it's interesting, I believe the world has always been hybrid. It's just the word hybrid that we have invented to describe the pace of change in the delivery system. When I first started teaching, I used chalk on the chalkboard. That's different than me giving a lecture. Then I went from white chalk to colored chalk, and I thought I was very creative when I went to colored chalk. And then I went to dry erasers of lots of colors all around the room, and then to PowerPoint, and then to Prezi, and then to webinars. We've always used technology, but what has happened now is that the pace, the intensity of the technology and the ability of the technology to enhance your teaching and the absorption of learning by students is dramatically increased. So enhancing the classroom experience and supporting it with technology and with methodology allows you to create a platform that you can reach beyond the physical space you're in. And I think it's super important. And again, the outcomes have really been interesting. Remember, we're a business school. Our students want to go create businesses, and they want to create value, and they want to capture some of that value. So these are the starting, this is how they get jobs, how much they're getting paid. But look at the number one is a return on investment for business schools. We were number one in the country. So over a 10-year period, did they get a return on their investment? There was a clear, crisp metric for that. Oops, I want to go back one. Can I go back, Sarah? Oh, well done. Thank you. It is really interesting, the changing of the business model in higher education. And I would talk to folks about looking for the nuance of changes in your business model, regardless of the industry you're in. It could be higher education, it could be automotive, it could be fitness. What are the changes that are happening, and can you stay focused on the customer and the well-being of the customer? What COVID taught us and maybe revealed is that there were significant health and wellness issues in the student body that maybe we weren't addressing as acutely as we should have been. And COVID made us look at those very closely and put an infrastructure of support around students that enhanced health and counseling and well-being services, and I think helped the student learn more and have a bigger, better opportunity for success professionally. One of the unique things we do, and this is super important to the business model and may answer a couple of questions down the line, we created centers and institutes that are market-facing programming that students can participate in at their choice, by their choice. And each of these centers looks at a vertical in industry that says, how do I take the knowledge I've gotten in the classroom, in my studies and in my research, and how can I have an experience that tests that knowledge in the marketplace? And so different verticals, we have created these 9 different verticals, and we may create more. This is completely market demand oriented. The latest one is the CD Metropolis Institute for Technology and Entrepreneurship. Market-facing programs to say, what did I learn and how did I put it into action? We're fond of saying at Babson that entrepreneurship is about thought and action. Thought without action is frivolous. Action without thought is dangerous. When you put them together, it is prosperous. It's easy to remember. I'm a retailer at heart. And I want to talk to you a little bit about the very dynamic changes. Higher education changes at glacial paces. And the typical administration in colleges is really hesitant. There are a lot of structures, much of them good, a very active faculty, an employment base that cares deeply about the institution, about creating knowledge and bringing that knowledge to the classroom and to students. But sometimes those mechanisms become rigid and become slow, and agility has become more and more important in every business model, and I think more important in higher education. So how do you build around the competencies of a deep understanding and scholarship and pedagogy and still be nimble? It's an incredibly interesting problem. At the core, I think we can maintain that very rigorous perspective, mostly in the undergraduate program and in the graduate program, in the credentialed programs, but around it before undergraduate. And as we bleed into a professional career and we continue to learn, can we be more nimble? And can some of that nimbleness flow back into the degree programs and allow for greater innovation? If we can get that balance right, we can change the way the higher education business model works. And frankly, the world is looking at outcomes one of the big differences in the ranking systems of colleges is they used to look at almost exclusively inputs. And inputs were, what was the grade point average of your incoming class? What was their SAT scores? What was their class rank? What high school did they come from? Now they're looking more at, if they came to your college, did you keep your promise? Did they get a job? Did they get a job in their field? What was the pay? What was the trajectory of their career? Did they have increased responsibilities in that trajectory? And the Wall Street Journal was one of the first to really drive that. We went from the best college in the world in entrepreneurship amongst business schools to the second best college in the country amongst all colleges. Ranked number 1 was Princeton, ranked number 3 was Stanford, and in the middle of that was Babson College. So we're playing in the big leagues. We're punching above our weight. We're adding value that we can prove. We have a value proposition that is crisp and understandable from our students. And if we can perpetuate that, we pull everyone along with us. And I think it's super important. We've always been, interesting little factoid here, we've been number 1 ranked for entrepreneurship for 31 years at the MBA level, 28 years at the undergraduate level. Next week, the rankings come out again. So it'll either be a day of celebration for Babson, or I'll start crying if we lose our 31 consecutive years. Frankly, and I'm completely subjective about this, I think we still deserve it. So I'm excited about next week. Most important of all of these, the most important one for me is being ranked number 1 career preparation and number 1 for return on investment. Two different national or international class organizations said you're preparing students for great careers and they're realizing it in economic return. Now they're doing other things too, but that's a measurable, that's a metric we can really focus on, and super proud of it. That I would ask, I would invite you, we have a terrific campus, 330 acres, really close to Boston. I'd love for you to come and visit and let me show you what we're doing here. I tried to do that in 15 minutes. I may have gone slightly over, but I get very excited about this subject.
No worries, absolutely. And I would actually second your invitation to anybody from our audience. It's a wonderful campus. It's very nicely organized, and it gives this feel that you want to be an entrepreneur. You also want to be among the students. You want to be discussing something, and they have this assured charisma. Almost every one of the students, they're very extroverted. And this is me recalling my visit some 8 years ago. I remember that I wanted to be a bit more like them after I left the campus. And then I went to Olin College of Engineering, and I wanted to be a bit like them. So it's a lot of schizophrenia here, because the colleges are literally meters apart.
Yeah.
President Spinella, thank you for this wonderful introduction. I have the first question here. We fought a bit with Isaac, and I got the first ask. So we believe there is a lot of value in tracing institutional evolutions, because it allows the practitioners to think about what's next for their universities, right? And I read a bit about the history of Babson College, and Roger Babson did not even believe in the beginning that entrepreneurs could be taught. He thought that it's like magic.
Yes.
You either have it or you don't. He completely mimicked the way business worked for the students. The first 27 students had secretaries, they were taught accounting, etc., etc., and it lasted a year. So my question is, how did you get from there to where you are now? What are the main stages of the evolution of Babson College model?
Yeah, just to add what, because we are very interested, and I guess that majority of our audience, both live and video, is from what we call brownfields, so well-established institutions.
Yeah.
But most our cases in our webinar, or at least many of them, are from very young universities. So we are very interested in this evolution of the model. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a super good question, Darren. Many people sort of miss that historical perspective, and I think it's really important. You know, from if you look back at the history of Roger Babson, there were some immutable values or principles that he had. He talked about bringing social value. He talked about equity in the marketplace. He talked about being honest and forthright. He talked about creating and sharing wealth. Those were more immutable principles. Then he debated the sort of other issues that, you know, how do you do accounting? He had some wild ideas about how you do accounting and how you do investment management. And he had a more open mind about change than you, as I read into the depth of, I think I've read everything he's written. As I read into the depth of what he did, he had very strong opinions, and some of them I think were just too rigid and too strong. But he did evolve as he went along. And one of the testimonies to the core principles of higher education in doing deep research in the creation of knowledge, he believed in the creation of knowledge. I think that the core of academia believes that that is an essential component to what we do in our contribution to society, is that unique research that advances knowledge. And as knowledge advances, you have to accept that or challenge it with more research. And so the respectful scholar respects the research that gets done. We did one of the things that was most important to Babson. Babson started thinking about entrepreneurship in the late 60s, early 70s. And it started with a research program that grew into a series of individual and consortia-based research projects. And that taught us. It taught us that it could be taught. It taught us that it could be leveraged, and it could be, you could grow a whole field, a whole discipline. It's like finding a new metal. And you say, oh my God, this is better than gold and silver. I thought there were all the precious metals had been discovered. And we look at the whole chart that says, here's all the phenomenon. And now there's a new kind of metal, and this metal is called entrepreneurship. And as we study that, we had the Babson College Entrepreneurial Research Conference, and we have the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, which is a consortium of national schools or international schools studying entrepreneurship on a global level. We have a journal that we publish, the Journal of Entrepreneurship in New Venturing, and that field grew, and we grew knowledge. That's the best of higher education. And the best things happen when you change someone's mind, including your own. And it went from, you can't teach entrepreneurship, it was fairy dust, and only special people got to be entrepreneurs, to, well, you can teach it, but you can only teach it to special people. And then it was, we think you can teach it to everyone, although people have different capabilities. You can teach me math. I'm not going to be a mathematician. You can teach me physics. I ain't going to do physics. But you can teach me entrepreneurship, and maybe I can start to build a lot of companies. So people have a different kind of affinity. And so I think we're in another stage where the dynamic changes in the marketplace, ubiquitously felt across the globe almost instantly, is now making entrepreneurship a competency that you must acquire. So I think we've gone from you can only teach it to, you can't teach it at all, to you must teach it to everyone. It has become a competency.
So you mentioned several tools you use to share your entrepreneurship education practices. I've always been very curious about what is now called Babson Collaborative, the Babson Academy for Collaborative and Entrepreneurial Education, if I'm not mistaken with the name.
Yes.
And I think there are over 40 institutions across the world that are part of the collaborative, including one institution in Saudi Arabia, as I found out a couple of months ago, to my surprise. So the question is, what is your vision for this? How do you see entrepreneurship education developing in the future? And how do you see the Babson's role in it? And is there a role, or are you just a member like everyone else? Or do you feel that the college should be taking lead?
You are a good scholar, Dara. You certainly do your homework. It's very impressive.
You do?
I'm impressed. You keep people on their toes. I love the collaborative. The collaborative started as an offshoot from the Symposium for Entrepreneurship Educators. Early in the process, when we were saying, okay, wow, we think we can teach entrepreneurship and we think we should teach entrepreneurship, there were very few entrepreneurship professors in the world. And number one. And number two, we learned that the entrepreneurship's interface, the thought and action paradigm, think deeply, act decisively, was so clearly manifest in entrepreneurship. Could we bring academics and practitioners together to learn more about entrepreneurship and how to transfer that knowledge to other people in other organizations and build curriculum and write cases and do books and have adjunct professors and have them be specialized? And we created the Symposium for Entrepreneurship Educators. That was for many years a supplier of professorial talent to colleges around the world. It then evolved into Babson Academy, where we created the collaborative, because all these schools now had professors and tenure track professors and endowed chairs and entrepreneurship centers and really great research. And we said, wow, it's not us teaching them, it's all of us growing this field. We can be better together. So we said, let's create an organizational structure called a collaborative that would allow people to easily go share information, go to each other's schools, find information, do collaborative research, create a curriculum together. And that has built to now almost 50 schools across the world, more international than in the United States. I think there's slightly more. It's about 50-50 United States and international institutions. And it is in that sharing. We believe that the sharing will be done when it's about 4,000 people in the collaborative, and then 4,000 colleges in the collaborative, or maybe more. That there's so much growth in this field that we need to bring more people in and create this explosion of understanding for entrepreneurship. And frankly, we think it's good for Babson. We still drive a lot of the thought leadership in it, and we think it's good for society. We'll create a lot of social and economic value from it.
So just a quick follow-up. You've partially answered this already, but innovative universities are often on the fence about spreading innovations, because on the one hand, yes, you can get thought leadership, but on the other hand, if a lot of other institutions are doing what you are doing, how would you be different in that case? What are the benefits, and what are some of the maybe advice for innovative institutions which are thinking, should I not, should I share what I do, should I take the lead, should I publish something about my approach, should I keep it to myself? What would you say?
I have strong feelings about this, so I may go over the top with it, and you can filter my energy or my enthusiasm or my emotion around this. I think the core mission of colleges and universities is to share, in that it is crazy to think that I'm going to create knowledge and understanding and hold it really tight, and I'm not going to share it. It's counterintuitive, and I think it's opposed to the mission of higher education or education in general. That's what we're here for. If you don't want to do that, go do something else, number one. That's a strong feeling, and I apologize for being so vociferous about that, but I really do believe it. The second part of that is there's a great American entrepreneur named Ray Kroc. Do you know who that is? Who Ray Kroc is?
Yes, the McDonald's
And
guy?
I don't.
Dara is brilliant. You're okay, Isaac, but Dara is really brilliant. Ray Kroc is the founder of McDonald's. And McDonald's, is an incredible symbol of entrepreneurship from a couple of different perspectives. There were hamburgers for a long, long time. He came around and he built a whole new industry around that old product because he saw a need in the marketplace, and he said, I can scale this to a national, international, global phenomenon. And his saying was, green and growing or ripe and rotting. If you're not sharing your knowledge, your learnings, your information, you are rotting. So You want to grow, you want to be green, you got to share it. It will push you. I'll tell you, it will push you to the next level, and you'll grow. So it's on mission for higher education, and it's good for you. It will push you to the next level.
Let me step in.
Yes, please.
Yeah. In fact, I always want to go to practical innovations, and I know that President Spinelli has a lot to share, but we have very interesting general discussions so far. So, look, in the famous book by Barton Clark, Entrepreneurial Universities, was published in, if I remember correctly, in 1998. So, and many universities claimed that since that they are entrepreneurial. But having in mind your experience as businessman, as CEO, and you continue to deal with companies. So, what are the main differences you see in evolution and innovations in companies and at universities?
Yeah, the reality is that universities, particularly in the United States, but in a lot of countries, have a protected legal and governmental and social position. And the protected position in the United States is endowments that are allowed to grow substantially and untaxed. And the ability of a university to create wealth for wonderful purposes. There's no nefarious behavior going on here. It's a noble cause, but it gives a competitive advantage to the colleges and universities in the acquisition of capital, and that's a huge advantage. That's very different than most other businesses and most other industries. You're taxed on your profit, and you're taxed on capital gain, and there's all kinds of policy interface. Colleges have that as an advantage. The credentialing is an important component because it signals value, but has become rigid and a bit of a straitjacket for a lot of colleges. The credentialing says to offer a degree, you must do the following things. And that, I think, stifles innovation for a lot of colleges and universities. I think so when you experiment, you have to experiment within this more narrow perspective than maybe a company could do. And the companies will get more dramatically rewarded for doing that experimentation with patents and with margin. That is really interesting, that we don't have a lot of in colleges and universities. We also have a very sophisticated workforce. The professoriate are significant players in the concept of shared governance in the United States and in other countries has provided great wisdom to the process, but has not created agility. And the increasing need for agility is something that I think that the organizational design has to look at really carefully. I think there are ways to do it. I think the place-based education can exist and be strong for a long time. And the more remote or hybrid activities might have greater flexibility. I think the lifelong learning and the need, no one says now, it used to be you graduate from college, you might get a master's degree or not, but I'll learn and I'll get it mostly on my own, which is near insanity. We have this amazing global infrastructure for the transfer of knowledge. And then we used to say, okay, I'm done with it. I've graduated. I'm going to send my customer away and no thank you. I never sent a customer away in my life. If you're a customer, I want you to the day you die. I want you to sign up every single month. And so we have an opportunity for lifelong learning. And where we have to, I think, evolve is to say, I am your learning partner for the rest of your life. Your parents got you until 8, and then I get you. And then God gets 88, and that's when I'll give you up. So I got 80 years of being your learning partner. I have a lawyer. I call him my lawyer. I own that lawyer. He doesn't know that, but I feel like I own him. I have my doctor. I call him my doctor. I don't call him the doctor. I call him my doctor. I want to be your educator. I want you to call me my educator for 80 years. That's the hope. That's the struggle. And if we can get that, if we can start to be nimble on lifelong learning, that understanding from the lifelong learning will get more quickly into our curriculum and credentialed programs, and we could have a positive flywheel that could get the best of both worlds.
Super. We already have a great clip for our introduction video, with great quotations. But that's very interesting, and yeah, I'm sure we have a lot of questions. But you mentioned one of the important innovations you mentioned is this hybrid thing. So on the one hand, you have a great campus, and obvious intent is to use the campus as a competitive advantage. But you go to hybrid. How you combine? And we see now, by the way, a kind of two worlds. One, cheap mass online courses, almost always asynchronous, and expensive, very intense campus experience. Do you build something in between, and what is this exactly?
Yeah, I think you build a spectrum in between. I think that the campus becomes the nuclear core. And I think of it as a nuclear reaction. We're splitting the atom on this campus, and the energy coming out of it is amazing. And there's terrific advantage into absorbing that energy on this campus. But we can have lines and we can have distribution systems that go out into the world and distribute that energy in the amounts you can tap into that energy source at whatever level you decide. And that's where the lifelong learning becomes so exciting. It becomes a co-creation. Look at what they're doing at Babson College. Boy, I would like some of that or that or that. I get to, as a lifelong learner, I get to pick off the menu. What we have for most of our credential learning, to get a degree in economics or to be a finance major at Babson, there's a rigorous program. We beat you to death around this. I mean, the students have to study hard, and the curriculum is really, really rigorous, and they need it, and that's good. When they leave, they have lots of other things in their lives, and they're building their businesses. Here's what I need now. Okay, we can supply that. We can take the menu of learning, and now we can deliver it. We have the nuclear core. We're creating all that knowledge. We know how to teach it. We have the pedagogy. Now we have the distribution. We have the electrical lines. We've strung the lines. We have the underground pipes. They're all virtual now, but we have, and some of them physical, we have that capability. I can teach. I created a course in franchising. I love franchising. It comes from franchising. So I could teach anyone in the world at any time anything they want to know about franchising. I could reach you in Uzbekistan, or I can reach you in Brazil. I can teach you about that. I can get specialists from each of those countries to support me in doing that. I can put that together in a day. There are so many ways now that we can reach the world, but we still need the nuclear core. If we're not splitting the atom, we're not going to get the energy to distribute. So I think we can live in two worlds.
Okay. That's very important. I do believe that this hybrid thing will be a real future of higher education. But coming back to your campus experience, you mentioned, by the way, I've listened a few podcasts or YouTube recordings of former Babson students. And many of them, to my surprise, mentioned that their co-curriculum is quite rigid and relatively big. I mean, share of that. So they do have a choice, but you really make them to work very hard on the core competences. Two small questions. Why you chosen that? Because it's very different from liberal arts, right? With unlimited, almost unlimited choice. And the second, how do you change this core? What is the procedure? Because Rick Miller mentioned that everything at All-In has expiration date. Do you have the same approach to your curriculum?
Yeah, it's a super good question, and one I will answer very directly. Our majors are business. There are competencies in business that we believe are essential in any field you go into in business if you're going to take any leadership position. If you don't know finance, if you aren't competent with accounting, if you don't have organizational behavior, if you don't have a clear understanding of the marketing function, if you don't have those skills, you can't play the game at a high level. If you can't shoot a basketball, you can't play basketball. You got to understand that part of the game. Now, you may dribble better or behind the back, have a different kind of offense. You can do all those kinds of things. God bless you, go as far as you can go. But you got to be able to shoot a basketball if you want to play basketball. That we believe when you leave Babson, you're going to have a set of core competencies that make you prepared to add value right away. If we can make sure that you get traction in your career early, you're going to climb faster. You're having a better ability. You're going to have greater credibility. You're going to add greater value. And we believe the marketplace is relatively efficient. It will see that and you will grow. Now, how you grow and how you see that, now we've got to give you ability to see beyond the basics and to look at opportunity. And what is the nature of opportunity? And what are the skills I need to be clearly recognizing differences in the marketplace? And that's where the integrated curriculum, and especially the co-curricular activities I showed in my little chart that we had 9 centers and institutes. That's only a part of the kind of programming that bumps you into the reality of the marketplace today. How am I taking that knowledge? How am I using it? What am I missing here? And in a relatively safe environment that's curated. Isaac, this is what you did wrong. Didn't you understand that when the customer came in, you weren't supposed to tackle them, you were supposed to hug them? There's ways in which that very practical experience, I used to say that, engage the customer, and a kid would come and grab him by the shirt. I said, no, that's not what I mean. So you have to have the practical experience to make that knowledge really supple and interesting and nuanced. So by bringing those centers and institutes together, they can participate. We've got 170 programs. You can participate in any or none. You got to start making decisions. Now, our faculty are terrific at saying, you need to bump into that. You need to go do investment management. You need to go to visit those franchises. You need to engage the Women's Entrepreneurial Leadership Network. When you get that kind, then I've got some choices. And when you can tap a student's emotional energy as a part of the learning process, when they see the connection to the being built as a person and an impact, they work twice as hard, and they don't even know they're working harder. They're just pouring everything into it. Finding that nuance, finding that it is a pedagogy of sorts, finding that teaching technique takes years and years and years, and all these other support systems around. It is not easy. Again, we'll give it away. We'll tell you exactly what we're doing. We don't hide anything. You're going to have to work hard to make it real at your institution.
So this comment about core competences dovetails nicely with the topic raised by one of our listeners today, Mark Brown. So Mark Brown is asking about personality, and he has got 2 questions. I'll ask them one by one. The first one, are there any common traits that successful entrepreneurs out of all of your alumni, some of them are entrepreneurs, some just have entrepreneurial spirit that they apply to something else. Some of them are successful, some of them are not, yada, yada, yada. The successful ones, are there some traits that are in common?
It's interesting because a lot of the literature in entrepreneurship started with sort of personality instead of inherent capabilities or traits. And the literature has become more sophisticated in teasing that out. And there is just a ton of literature on resilience. The ability to take a punch and not get out of the ring, to stay in the ring and keep fighting, is an amazing part of the game. There is also this sense of mission, that I'm doing something important. That's why this integration of sort of social and economic value is important on many different levels. It starts with a very personal, I'm doing something important. Makes a difference. I think they work together. I'm doing something important. Oh, I'm not going to stop just because I got punched. I'm going to keep going. So doing something important in great resilience makes a difference. I think there is a propensity to measure that is really interesting to me. And some people, I think, confuse that with net worth. How much money am I making? I will be clear, and I don't mind this being recorded. I think making money is a good thing. I want all of you to make a lot of money, and I would love for you to donate some of it to Babson, but you do whatever you want to do with your money. So, I think it's a good thing. I think it's society's rewarding you for adding value, for creating something special. But what we have found is that people who see value in a much more three-dimensional way are much more resilient, much more sustainable. They're durable. It's almost the discount rate of the income stream is lower. You discount it because I see that I'm doing something good as a part of that. So it is that textured approach to what is value, how do I define that value, does my organization understand communication skills and relationship skills? Scott Taylor from Babson has written an incredible paper on entrepreneurial leadership that talks about the psychosocial emotional content of the entrepreneurial leader, how they relate those kinds of, I define value, do you define it? They listen well. Organizationally, we believe we become more resilient because of that. We become more targeted. We measure together. It is an interesting combination of the quantitative and the qualitative characteristics. I would say make it simple again. People who are resilient stay in the game longer and win more often.
So there was a comment about resilience, which I cannot resist quoting. Mark Brown writes, as one person calls it, rare resilience, having a rubber arse, as in you can bounce back time and time again.
Right.
Now,
some people have said I've got a rubber brain, so maybe I'm banging my head.
I guess it depends on what you fall on.
Yeah.
There is the second part to this question about personality, and it's a bit more complex. Are there any differences between entrepreneurs and people who nurture others to be entrepreneurial? And I guess you're the perfect person to answer this because all of Babson professors are entrepreneurs as well. So is there a difference between someone who is doing it and someone who teaches to do it while also being able to perform entrepreneurial action and think entrepreneurially?
I'm going to give you the scholarly answer first, and then I'm going to give the personal answer second. The scholarly answer is to read Scott Taylor's paper. It was in my presentation, and he talks about that in both scientific and educational terms. That is so much more articulate than I am that I'm embarrassed to even follow up, but I have to because you're being kind to me and I want to answer your question. But the real answer is read Scott Taylor's paper. It will change your mind about how you teach, how you feel about yourself, and what kind of personal growth you want to have. So I can't tell you how. I'm an old guy. I read that paper and it changed how I see the world. It was that, for me, that important. I think the other part has something to do with scale. I think the driven entrepreneur who really is resilient and tough and wants to have something happen can start and be successful in business, and I think it's almost required. To bring it to scale, you typically have to go beyond yourself. And can you build organizations that believe? Do you have one-on-one relationship, one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-many? Can you build organizations that can communicate across a broader audience and bring a team together? Overused word, but really, really important. Can we bring them together around a common purpose? And can we see a longer term perspective on value creation? Do we have a common understanding of what that means? That creates scale. That allows you to go beyond the small business or the individual startup. Now, I think, there's outliers in everything in the world. So someone will come up with lots of examples of an individual that brought it to scale. But I think if you look more deeply, you'll see most organizations that are both larger and durable, they have built entrepreneurial personalities in the organization. And it starts with a person that's willing to build those relationships.
We've got one more question from the audience, and it's the last one. In the light of the many crises in the world now, are you finding that you are now attracting students who are more concerned with UN SDGs, global awareness than ever, who are looking for a social value dimension of what they do, or are the students sort of the same as they have always been?
Okay, we're seeing students that I don't think I could compete with. I'm so grateful I'm at the end of my career because they're so much better than me. I fear I would fail. It's a daunting set of talents. So I think that's a testimony to some parenting. I think it's a testimony to some educational systems. And I think it's a testimony to the broader view of the world. Our students do come with a set of social values and perspectives on what is value. In that definition of value, they talk about money. Let me be clear. They do talk, that's a good metric, but that is not the only thing, and sometimes not the most important thing that they talk about. They talk about a very three-dimensional definition of value. They talk about how they're going to affect communities. They talk about how they're going to solve problems. They talk about how they're going to nurture the environment. They talk about social responsibility. They talk about equality in the workplace. They talk about all of those things as a natural phenomenon of how to create the best opportunity. And we're getting to, that's not a discussion we have to start here. It's a discussion when they come to Babson College, we have to continue and elevate because they're coming with those attitudes now. And I think it is an incredible advantage to the world if we can keep ourselves on the straight and narrow. If we can do all of that with respect, we could have just a golden age.
Thank you. It's a pity, unfortunately, this exciting session, and we have a lot of more questions, but it's coming to the end. We have a discipline, but also President Spinelli is super busy man. So the last question that we ask each of our presenters is about the advice. In this case, I would form it even more narrow. So if you became a leader of established university with at least 100 years history, but you feel that you want to do something different, what should you start with? What would be your advice?
Look over the 100 years and understand the trajectory of values. Are there core values that are consistent through that history, and or are there values that have evolved to a community set of understandings that create a foundation for their purpose? Then, with those values, how are you going to deliver value to the marketplace? How are you creating knowledge that will be true to those values and add something to society, to your students, and be targeted with that? Be really specific about who you are and how you're going to add that value, and be a leader and build relationships that believe in that.
Thank you.
This was a lot of fun. You guys are good.
Thank you. Yeah, let's exchange compliments. Yeah, because it was real fun, and again, I personally got quite a few new thoughts from this conversation. This is learning experience for us, but unfortunately, we have to close this. Dara, please go ahead. Yeah.
This was brilliant. This was truly brilliant. Thank you so much, President Spinelli. And I'm looking forward to dropping by one more time to see the green hills of Wellesley, the town, and Babson College, the institution. Now, to everyone else, the conversation doesn't stop here. Isaac and I, share our takeaways after every webinar on our personal pages and in the LinkedIn group that you can join the conversation. We'll be talking about innovative higher education institutions, sometimes innovative higher education institution leaders, such as yourselves. So please join up and, well, maybe have a rubber arse if something doesn't work.